So, for the gentleman recording, HTTPS idknow.org has all my previous presentations. It's where slides for this will appear, along with links to what little sample code there is. You will get ones that have been recorded at big conferences. So the audio will probably be a little bit better than what you're going to manage tonight, because of course I'm here and your mic is off to my right. So you may find that more useful. So thank you very much for coming. My name is Barry Dorrans. I'm the .NET Security PM, which is a thankless task because I try and stop people shipping just because I'm mean and horrible and everyone upsets me. Basically, I try and stop them introducing security bugs into the .NET Framework and .NET Core and ASP .NET. Doing things from API reviews to try and write APIs that are safe by default, all the way through to organizing the pen testing and the fuzz testing and all the rest of that good stuff. So I basically annoy absolutely everyone, and I tell them how to do things correctly, but I don't have to do it myself, which is great. That's what being a PM is. Unfortunately, I also get to deal with it when we miss things. So I get to deal with the MSRC cases when people email secure@microsoft.com. So I get emails sent to me on Boxing Day, on the 26th of December, when I am on the ski slopes. I got a telephone call on Valentine's Day. My long-suffering wife puts up with this reasonably well. She didn't like it when I had to answer emails on our honeymoon. We were in Europe. She was jet-lagged. I thought she was asleep and it would be okay, and unfortunately she woke up whilst I was going, no, 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 hell no, you can't do this, and sending that sort of email. I am also on Twitter as @blowdart. It is not particularly work-related. It is quite sweary. It is quite ranty. It is not for those of a nervous disposition. But there are also pics of my dog that appear every now and again, so that's nice. So, how many of you here are using .NET Core? Because you're going to know all of this stuff. Then why am I here? I mean, all right. How many of you are using .NET Core 2? Okay. Then I'm going to go through this, and probably the easiest thing to do is just yell out questions as I go along, because I'm sure some of you will have questions about the bizarre decisions that we've made, or have questions about why something doesn't make sense for you. And because so many of you are using it, I think that's probably the more interesting way to go. So I'm going to start off with hosting, which is the bugbear of my life. You see, we didn't think that IIS was a good enough web server, so we decided to write our own. And writing your own web server makes security people really unhappy, because a brand new web server is a rare thing. And when we went to send out bids for external pen testers to come look at this, every single company we asked about it got really excited, and they went, "What, you wrote a new web server? Are you insane?" "Yeah, we'll try and break that, that's fine." So, in .NET Core 2.0, we now have the ability to do HTTPS, which was not there particularly well in 1.0. It's all based on configuration. Now, IIS Express self-signed certificates has been a bit of a mess. Originally, when we did this, Chrome changed the rules on us, which was nice, and changed how they were looking at self-signed certs. So if you are stuck with Chrome complaining that it doesn't have the right type of certificate, that gist will get you fixed if you're unable to update to a later version of Visual Studio. But the later versions of Visual Studio sort this sort of mess out for you. But I am aware that some people are in constrained environments and they can't update, so there is a gist there that will regenerate certs. This is how we configure certificates. Everything is in JSON because no one likes angle brackets anymore. So our standard configuration is pretty much like this. It will allow you to go through and look for things based on the subject name. It will allow you to pick up self-signed search if you do allow invalid is true. And it will pick the one that has the furthest away expiry date, which is useful. So if you have multiple things where the common name is for localhost, it will pick the one that has the longest the longest validity period, as long as it's already valid. If you have one that's only going to be valid from tomorrow, we'll ignore that. And then, because we try and do everything by configuration, you don't even need to tell it. If you have that HTTPS setting inside your config, we will pick it up and we will bind to HTTPS for you. How many of you paid any attention to the documentation in .NET Core 1 that said, do not expose Kestrel directly to the internet? Would anyone like to admit that they exposed Kestrel directly to the internet in version 1? You're a horrible, horrible person, sir. I told you not to do it. You make me sad. There were good reasons why we told you not to do it. There were a bunch of common vulnerabilities that we did not have time to fix in version 1, including classic ones like slow Loris attacks. In version 2, we added enough timeouts and limitations that you can expose Kestrel to the internet if you want. Have you updated?
Oh, it was a while back.
Okay. All right. So this is where I make our product managers unhappy. Yes, we will support you if you expose Kestrel 2.0 directly to the internet. As a security person, do I recommend it? It is a brand new web server. It has not been used or, frankly, tested as much as Apache or IIS or Nginx or anything else that's out there. It's new code. We keep finding things that are wrong in it. If you look at the announcements repo for ASP.NET, every now and again you will see a Kestrel vulnerability just because it is new. In my own opinion, you are currently safer putting it behind a well-tested proxy because you have defense in depth there. But if you want to expose it direct to the internet, we will support you. We will fix all bugs that will create denial of service attacks or crashes or anything else. It's a risk-reward system. If you want the speed, by all means, set yourself to ramming speed and ram the internet.
How about, so behind a load balancer, like a hardware load balancer, that generally considered safe enough? Okay.
So yes, putting things behind a load balancer is generally considered safe, as long as it is not a streaming load balancer.
Right.
If the load balancer terminates the connection,
right,
then it's generally doing all the DOS protection that we built in, and that's still new code. So if it terminates and forwards, you're good. If it streams through, you're like, So Nginx, IIS, Apache as a load balancer, all that sort of goodness is absolutely fine. But like I say, if you want to expose it to the internet, feel free. So that's the hosting scenario. And
is it slower now that it's more secure?
Is it slower now that it's more? Yes. Which is a long-standing argument I have with David Fowler. Whether we want to go for performance or security, and in 2.0 I won. It's not that much slower. In fact, we added a lot more speed for a lot more other things, so it's faster overall in 2.0, but if we strip the security out, it'd be an awful lot faster, and I'm not going to let them do that. Because I like sleeping in at the weekend. So, that's hosting. Authentication. Asking who you are. So we have a bunch of templates in ASP .NET Core. When you create a new project, you can have no authentication. You can have individual user accounts, which is ASP.NET Identity, which is basically a database schema and a bunch of helper classes around it, so you can hold your username and your, well, you don't hold your password in the database, you have a hashed representation of the password, because I wouldn't let them away with putting it in plain text. We have work and school accounts, so that's Azure Active Directory, and Azure, and then we have Windows authentication, which is only available on Windows. The number of times I have to close issues in the Kestrel repo that say, why can't you support Windows authentication on Linux? The clue's in the name. Now, I'm aware that some people do want Kerberos authentication, and I'm being quite picky here, and we are considering it, but it's stupidly complicated, and we don't really want people to end up having to run Samba on a web server, because Samba is a pit of security failure. So, we'll get there. We have social authentication support. We have support for Facebook, we have support for Twitter, we have support for Google, we have support for Microsoft account, or whatever the heck it's called this week. And we have support for generic OAuth, and OAuth 2 and OIDC. There is a community-driven project which has a metric ton of OAuth providers, including GitHub, Dropbox, and so on and so forth, a bunch of social networks that I've never even heard of and probably only have 2 or 3 people on it. But if you want to connect to something that's weird that we don't provide out of the box, that's your GitHub project to go to, because it's probably going to be in there. So individual user accounts, it's a local database. You have to manage everything. You have to worry about being breached, especially as the GDPR comes along. We give you a bunch of starter EF models which you can configure. So you can change how the model works for your accounts, you can change how the model works for your groups. The one thing that is incredibly hard to change is the primary key. Lots of people want to change the primary key type to be an integer or a GUID rather than a string, and that just breaks the entire world. It will get easier in 2.2 because we finally set aside some time to work on that. But it's really opinionated. We choose all your password algorithms for you. We're not going to give you a choice, and we're actually going to upgrade algorithms as things get broken, and it will happen automatically. So when a user logs in and their password is hashed with an older algorithm, we'll rehash it and store it with the newer one. And it also provides authentication via OIDC. If you want to plug in Facebook or Google or anything else like that, it will plug into the identity system. Then we have work and school accounts, which is Azure Active Directory and is OIDC based. If you have an on-premise, or premises, because that's more correct and I'm British, you can use OpenID Connect if you have ADFS 2016. If you have ever tried to convince your networking people to update a key component like ADFS, you will know how difficult it is. Is there anyone here from MSIT? No? Good. They're really bad at this. Trying to get them to run the latest stuff against our production AD is difficult. And you can understand why. It's a key infrastructure component. You don't want to break people logging in so they can't get to their HR database to see how empty my last paycheck was. So previous versions of ADFS are WS-Fed. Anyone here working in banking? Anyone here working in something that's just old? Banking, healthcare, government? Okay, I see nods. Banking, healthcare, and government generally lag behind everyone else. So the European banking system is still stuck on WS-Fed, as is all our local, state, and countrywide governments. Having said that, their chip and pin implementation is a lot better than the US's is. So, you know, they win there. So we finally shipped a WS-Fed middleware in February. So if you are stuck in the old stuff and you need WS-Fed, it is finally there. And then Windows Authentication currently needs IIS. Your servers need to be Gmail joined, and the change that we made from classic ASP to ASP.NET Core is there is no automatic impersonation anymore because it's a security nightmare. You need to make specific decisions about when you want to impersonate. So if you want to connect to a database as a user, call .impersonate before you do the connection, and then back out of impersonation afterwards. Do it in a using.
Quick question.
Yes.
So the work and school accounts thing.
Yes.
So does it still support federating like social OIDC accounts like Facebook, Google?
That. Okay, Azure Active, if I say I want to use a work account and limit it to Azure Active Directory, that is it.
Okay.
However, you can finagle these things. There is Azure Business to Consumer, which does support registering with social accounts, but then you can't mix that in Azure Active Directory without a bit of work. You can have multiple authentication providers, you can wire up as many authentication middlewares as you want. It's just up to you to then display to the user, please choose from this, this, and this.
Okay.
If you want something that does the entire thing and does it nicely, if you want to own the code and you want to do a bunch of configuration, there is Identity Server. If you want to do absolutely nothing, there are rivals to us like
Auth0.
Auth0, that's the one. The one that Glenn blocks out. Yeah, they're down in Seattle, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Auth0 seems to be a better option for a lot of people than Azure B2C. But you can do all this sort of stuff manually. We give you all the stepping points, which is, of course is what people like Auth0 then build upon.
Right.
There was another question.
Yeah, this first section, individual user accounts, what particular solution are you referring to? Is it ASP.NET Identity or?
It is. Individual user accounts is ASP.NET Identity, so it uses that as its schema and all the classes around it and the templates and everything else.
Is it still the hashing algorithm like 100 years old, PDKF?
No.
No? What is it?
I can look it up. Hold on.
Oh, it's okay.
It's been a while since I've done it, but no, we did a massive update for it. So you can still use the old one because we offer that for back compatibility in case you want to share. But I'm sure it's actually documented in the docs stuff. But why bother doing that? Except of course they moved absolutely everything around them. No, that's the wrong one.
Oh, it's okay. Let's move on.
We updated it a lot and increased the iterations and gave you the chance to change the iteration count if you want. But I can't remember what we upgraded it to. It'll be in the docs somewhere because we spent, for a change, some time documenting this.
Because it was heavily criticized.
It was.
Many things.
Yes. The problem we have here is people want to have an awful lot of security around their hashing algorithm, and a secure hashing algorithm is a slow hashing algorithm. So if you want your login to take 5 seconds and your users just to vanish, there's a balancing act there. So you can tweak it a bit, and of course, you can replace it with what you want. If you want bcrypt, replace it. It's easy enough to do. So when we moved from classic framework to .NET Core, we threw away any ability for you to use a custom identity class. Everything is now claims principle based, and that's all the way through .NET Core. We added the support for multiple authentication middleware because that was really hard in Katana. And you could put them all in the pipeline, and you can cherry pick which one to use if you're doing authorization. So if you have a web API, you could say that your web API is protected by job tokens, but the rest of the site is protected by cookies. And only one middleware can run automatically. The other difference we had is that cookie authentication finally understood the difference between unauthenticated and forbidden. So you can display different errors.
Well, that was an issue with more than cookie. Okay, no, I'm confusing that with there's a web API, the authorize attribute.
Oh yes, so it's all the way through now. We finally understand the difference between forbidden and unauthorized, and we will return the right status codes in the case of JOT, or we will redirect you to different web pages in the case of cookie or AAD or all the rest. But I said that you could run multiple authentication middleware, and you were only to set one of these things as active because the active middleware is the one that runs on every single request. And that was possible to do, but we made it way too flexible. So it was possible to set more than one middleware to be active, and you would end up in what we euphemistically call an unsupported state. Or more accurately, we have no idea what the hell is going to happen. So in 2.0, we changed things up a bit. There is no individual middlewares anymore. There is a single middleware that is the authentication middleware, and then you plug in the types of authentication that you want into the authentication middleware. And because we only have a single authentication middleware, we can now enforce the fact that you can only choose one active scheme that runs on every request. And also, the thing that I am most happy about is we finally got rid of SMS for two-factor authentication. Because SMS sucks for two-factor authentication. We now have built-in support for authenticator apps. Mostly. We have built-in support for them, but we do not have QR code generation. We have instructions on how you can add QR code generation because shipping open source software in Microsoft that does not belong to us has an interesting high bar. It has to go through a bunch of security reviews, it has to go through a bunch of legal reviews, and then we have to try and pick a winner. We don't like picking winners. We don't want to like undermine one community effort. So the instructions that we have basically say, uncomment this line, plug in this piece of JavaScript from this JavaScript library, and paste this thing in, because that gets us around having to go through a full-blown security review, and we're not picking a winner. You can choose a bunch of QR code generation libraries. So I know, yes.
QR code is free public Google service. That's what I use, right? You give
If you think
URL and
if you think we're going to ship anything that has a Google service in it out of our box, never ever going to happen. That would be political suicide for me. Do you want to get me fired, sir?
I don't care, but it's
That's fair enough. But yeah, no, I take your point, but it's